monsters, madness, and magic.
All right, folks. Welcome to the Monsters, Madness, and Magic podcast. I'm your host, Justin, here with a quick word before we dive in. First order of business, a personal thank you and shout out to my friend Worm of Serpent Sword Records, who put together the intro you just listened to. I have linked his Bandcamp in the episode notes and description below if you're watching on YouTube. So if you like what you hear, please visit and show him some support. Next order of business is, while there was video to this episode, I am an idiot and somehow the audio and the video got screwed up in the process of recording. So this will be an audio only episode and no video will be included, but the audio sounds just fine. So again, if you are expecting a video, sorry about that, but I fixed it for future recordings. So, anyway, in this episode, I chat with booking agent and metalhead Oliver Weinsheimer about Conan, being spooked by horror movies, the origins of the Keep It True festival, maintaining relationships with bands, and more. As always, thank you all for listening out there. And without further ado, here you go. All right, Oliver, take us back in time. You're a little kid. Were you a book reader, fort builder, troublemaker, or all of the above?
That is a very tough question. Even as a kid, I was a bit different than the usual kids. I was never a big book reader. I was never a troublemaker, and actually, I mainly started out as a music fanatic in the early days already, and I bought myself my first vinyl when I was 6 or 7 or something back then. Not real music or metal in general. It was just kid stuff. There was always already the urge to do something with this, and then when I was 10 or 11, I found Kiss Unmasked in a record store. I had no clue what it is. It was just the artwork was impressing me because I was back then, it was in 80, 81, something like this. I was just into comics and Superman, Batman, and all that stuff. And I liked the cover artwork, so I bought it, brought it home, put it on the record player, and thought to myself, "Oh my God, what is this hard stuff?" And I had to get convenient with it and listen to it over and over again, and so the addiction started there.
Would you say that your parents were big music lovers as well? Is that where your roots come from?
No, not at all. The only stuff my parents had was like Elvis vinyls and Boney M and stuff like this, but there was no collection or anything like this. I started listening to local radio here. That's where I got into music. My parents were never into music at all. They just saw it as they just listened to music when driving in the radio. That was everything, but there was no passion or anything. So I had to work it out all myself.
Now, where you grew up in Germany yourself, was it a more rural area? Was it in the city or something like that?
Yeah, it was a rural area, a very small village, maybe 1,000, 2,000 people, something like this. There was nothing to do there, and there was I grew up actually partly with my grandmother, and after school I there was like a half an hour or 45-minute walk to the downtown of the little village, and there was one record store. I walked there, and you could listen to that stuff on the record player there, and this was the early 80s, so there was after I got that Kiss record, it was in a convenience store actually, and then after that I checked out where I can get more vinyl, and then I walked to the record store, and first of all I bought all the other Kiss albums because this was the only band I knew that's playing that style. And then, of course, I started buying magazines, reading about it, and That's where the experience and the musical taste started to grow very slowly. So, but the poppiest Kiss album was the starting point for everything, actually.
Did that make you want to pick up an instrument or start your own band or anything like that?
Not an instrument. In the beginnings, I tried out guitar, but I was too dumb. In Germany we say I have two left hands, so I did not I could not even play Smoke on the Water on the guitar, so I skipped that completely. But I tried singing. That was in the early 90s, and I took singing lessons, and I actually recorded one album with a band called Shadows of Iga, 1992. Yeah, but this was the only recording, studio recording I did. I did some backing vocals for other bands and stuff like this, and like guest vocals, but nothing really serious. But this was my whole musician career, actually. Back then in the 90s, that stuff that people nowadays call power metal was US metal. Nowadays, power metal is all the cheesy melodic bands, but back then it was like the stuff like Metal Church, Vicious Rumors, and all that stuff. We were kind of in that vein. The whole album is on YouTube if you want to listen to it. So it's like kids doing totally clueless doing an album in their hometown in a studio, and the guy was smoking pot all day that recorded it. So I mean, if you would do it now, it would sound for sure different, but it's what it is. I still like it. I We played a lot of shows back then, supporting bigger bands and stuff. But that's I left the band after a few years, and they recorded a second album. But it never got big or anything like this.
So, Oliver, sticking with your childhood, when you think back to movies and TV shows that you grew up on, what pops into your head?
Oh, that is a longer topic. When I was 11 years old in the town, next bigger town is called Würzburg here in close to my hometown, and they had three big cinemas there and theaters. In only one theater, I was able to sneak in for movies that were over my age, and I was 11 back then, and the first. I mean, of course, we don't count Disney movies and all that stuff. The first real movie I saw in the theater was Excalibur when it came out, and I had to sneak in because back then it was over 18 here in Germany, and as an 11-year-old kid, it was a complete shock because it was full of blood and gore and all that fantastic stuff and all that. I mean, that movie is already very extraordinary compared to other, I would say, medieval movies because it has a certain feel to it. But when you see it as a kid, it's like a shock. It's like mythical. The year after, I was fascinated, and the year after, I sneaked into Conan the Barbarian, also rated over 18 here in Germany, and it was even bloodier. And this is what changed my life completely because I from then I got a diehard fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and especially barbarian movies and fantasy movies, and I started to get VHS copies of all these Sandal movies, all these 80s muscle bodybuilding guy movies. And still today, I still have my collection here. I will never give it away. This is what started. I really grew into a big fan of this, and this also influenced my musical taste because in somehow a band like Manowar, they were like the musical version of Conan the Barbarian. When you see when these albums came out, like Battle Hymns 82 and Into Glory Ride 83, Hail to England 84, this was completely inspired by Conan the Barbarian, the outfits, everything. And back then in the 90s, I started writing for metal fanzines. I created two of them myself with other friends. And I had the chance to talk to Joey DeMaio. And of course, I asked him for the connection between especially Into Glory Ride and all the fur and all that stuff. And back then, he clearly admitted that they were highly influenced by it, and that was the starting point of the band. So for me, that was the perfect connection between my movie taste and my musical taste.
So, Oliver, the Conan film, was that your first introduction into the Conan character? Did you retroactively seek out Robert Howard after that?
Yes, that was my first introduction to the Robert E. Howard stuff. Of course, it's not exactly like Robert E. Howard described Conan, but to me, it was the most influential because to me, since that day I saw it, to me, Arnold was always the Conan. People who read the books first, they would say different because they would imagine him with black hair and moving like a panther and stuff like this. But to me, this was exactly what I imagined Conan the Barbarian. Many years later, I think it was now 5 or 6 years ago, I fulfilled my dream and visited the filming locations of the first Conan in Spain because I through the music I met one of the biggest Conan the Barbarian movie freaks in the world. He knew everything and he knew every location what is filmed. He even owns the original Wheel of Pain. He found it. It was crushed somewhere and he found it. He repaired it and built it up completely and he built a house around it and he invited me there and I I was able to move the original Wheel of Pain. This was for a fanboy like me, this was like complete insanity. This is stuff you cannot make up. This is the real deal of a fanboy dream. Yeah, and since then, I shortly after I went there, I had the chance to meet Arnold in Berlin. He did a question and answer session there. And after that, you had the chance to do photos. In the early 2000s, I got in contact with the original guy who forged the swords for Conan the Barbarian. Jody Sampson is his name. And they did these, they did exact copies for Albion Armorers. This is the sword company. But he was the original guy. He had the original cast and everything. And he handmade the Atlantean sword for me. It cost me a shitload of money. I still have it here right next to me. And I took it for the meeting with Arnold, and they wouldn't let me in at the doors, the securities. Then I got in touch with the organizer, and he said, "Give me the sword, and when you are on the photo shoot with Arnold, I give it to you, and then you can do it." Yeah. Then I went in the line, and I was next, and he really gave me the sword, but he had, of course, these two big American securities next to him, and they said, "Oh, don't raise that sword. It can be dangerous." And I told to Arnold, "What bullshit is this when I hold the sword down and it does not make any sense?" And he said, "Do whatever you want." I raised the sword up next to him, and the bodyguards were like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa!" Like that FBI like. And but I made great photos with the sword, and I have a leather jacket with a Conan artwork on the back, and Arnold was smiling. He liked it a lot. So, but this was only maybe 30 seconds. It's a lifetime dream. Back then he was a bit more fit than nowadays, but I saw some footage of him lately, and he did not look very, how shall I say, healthy anymore.
Would you consider yourself a horror movie fan too, Oliver?
Yeah. Also, it started also in the 80s because back then in the 80s, when you were a kid, you wanted to test out the limits. And of course, the stuff that was forbidden was always the most interesting. Then you had to go in. Back then in Germany, we had these video VHS rental stores. There was a special area from over 18. You should have to show your passport to go in there, but actually no one cared. So you could rent every movie you want, and I rented all the VHS that were Friday 13th, Halloween, and this was back then. It was censored, and I mean in America it was way easier to watch this stuff, but in Europe these movies they were much more censored, like in America. they were cut, missing minutes of it, and but sometimes you got a bootleg copy of like Evil Dead 1 and 2 and Hellraiser and all these things, and yeah, I watched all of these, and of course I enjoyed them a lot. I actually in when was it? In I think 2 months ago or 1.5 months ago, I actually was able to do a photo with Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger. Yeah, that was very crazy. I mean, it was on a Comic Con. I mean, they charge money for it, but it's a great memory to have, and it brings you back to your childhood when you watched all that movie in your bed and were scared as fuck. When you watch these movies nowadays, I don't get even scared from it. As a kid, it's way different.
Now, you said when you were growing up in the 80s that a lot of these German movies were heavily censored. Is that still the case even today?
Not so much anymore. Maybe a few exceptions, but back then in the 80s, there was like a rating agency here that watched every movie that came out, and they said this can be released and this cannot be released, and if you want to release this, you have to cut out 5 minutes of it or something like this. And that was very tough back then. So there was a big bootleg market for hand copied VHS with the uncut versions.
Gotcha. A question I like to ask everyone, Oliver, is what scared you as a kid?
Oh, there's one thing. It sounds ridiculous nowadays because it's not scary at all if you watch it now. But when I was a little kid, I watched the original Universal Studios Wolfman. So scared of that portrayal of the Wolfman. It continued with every werewolf movie I saw later. There was I cannot remember the name. There was from the 80s. There was another werewolf movie, the one with Oliver Reed. It was, and also this one scared the shit out of me. As a teenager, I had nightmares from it still. But when I watch it nowadays, it's completely gone, of course. But back then, it was really scary as hell to me. The whole atmosphere of the movie and everything, it was so surreal, and all that mist on the graveyards and everything. Nowadays, if you watch it, now you have a different mindset about it. But back then, it was completely new, and as a kid, you could not imagine that these things could. You thought it's real, and nowadays you know all the tricks because there's documentaries about everything, and you can Google in the internet about it how it's done and everything. Back then, there was no internet.
While we're on horror movies, Oliver, is there anything that's come out recently that you've enjoyed? Maybe have you seen the new Nosferatu by Robert Eggers?
I watched the Nosferatu. I still have to watch the extended version. I have to say, I was my wife liked it a lot, but I was a bit disappointed by the Nosferatu portrayal himself, and especially the female main character, the daughter of Johnny Depp. I did not like her in the movie. It was over the top acting. I think nowadays horror movies, either they are completely predictable or they have bad CGI. There's no scary thing with CGI. I will never get it. Practical effects are the best, but I really like the last Alien movie. It was a mix of practical effects and CGI effects, and I think it was a worth new version of the Alien saga. We watch so many, my wife and me, we watch so many movies. There's nothing that sticks in my head that I would say it's a new classic or anything like this. My favorites are like in Germany it was called Brain Dead, and the Evil Dead movies, Nightmare movies, and Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the whole classics from the 80s. It's still my favorite.
Yeah, Brain Dead, Peter Jackson, that was called Dead Alive in the States. There's a lot of similarities between Dead Alive and Evil Dead with the comedy aspect and sort of the over the top gore.
Well, for example, the Brain Dead movie in Germany, the whole ending was not in the movie at all. Where he has this lawn mower. He You see him go in the house, and then the movie's over. I saw the German version, and I said, what the hell is going on here? And then I had to get a bootleg copy of the original to see what actually happening in the movie. Europeans are very strange with this.
Now, Oliver, obviously you collect records and you collect movies. Let's split them up here. What would you say is the most rare record that you own, and what is the most rare movie that you've collected?
Oh, this is a very good question. I would say the rarest record would be the original Leather Nun. It's a band from Texas. Not from Texas, from Florida. I got it. Normally, it goes for 2,500 euros, and I found it on a record fair in Holland for about. I bought it together with a Tyrant's Reign for 500 or 600. That was a very good deal. It's even signed by all members. For movie collecting, I actually don't collect so much. I just try to buy the best quality of the my favorite movies, and that's why I like buying the 4K stuff. But maybe my biggest my most precious is the original Conan the Barbarian VHS, because the German one was way more rare to get, because it has different it's the name is in German and everything, and it was not so widespread back then in Germany. I will cherish that one forever, but compared to music, I don't collect so much in the movie genre.
So that version of Conan that you have now, is that the same edited German version that you had when you were a kid?
I couldn't because VHS back then were highly expensive. Back then, I always rented the VHS from the VHS rental, and I bought a cable for two VHS recorders and copied it. I never bought a VHS, to be honest, because it was simply with my money I had, it was simply impossible to buy all my favorite movies back then. And later it started with DVDs and Blu-rays, and now the 4K stuff. So I was very happy that they finally got out a very big Conan 4K version of it, which is very well done. But it was only released in America, and so you need a code-free player for Europe again, and all this bullshit. So there's always something.
Just curious, what did you think of the Jason Momoa Conan adaptation?
I don't even want to start about it. I actually like Jason as an actor and a character. He was not the problem of the movie. It was the bad script and all that bad effects, and the whole movie was bullshit. He could have he could have made a real good Conan, in my opinion, because he looked more like the Robert E. Howard version of it. He had dark hair and blue eyes and all that stuff. They had no clue about the source material, and they got a guy writing a script that had no clue about either Robert E. Howard or the Arnold original. So this was just a waste of time, and I was through all the years I was hoping for the third Conan with Arnold when he's a king now, but I think he's too old now. He can maybe sit on the throne with an axe, and that's it. Yeah, it's just sad because Arnold wanted to do it since many years, but the owner of the Conan property, he fucked it up for so many years. I think the company is called Paradox Entertainment or something. He did so many wrong decisions about the Conan character and everything, made bad computer games with it. Now it starts getting a little bit better because they produce these action figures at Super 7, and they look pretty cool and everything. I import them all because I love to have them in my collection. I don't have high expectations of another movie or anything like this, and I would be very skeptical if they could. Nowadays, there would be the spirit missing of the first, and the first was something completely different to all the other heroic barbarian movies, because all the other ones were clones of the Arnold movie. It's simply impossible, I think.
I agree with you, man. So, just moving back to music for a bit, what was the first concert that you attended?
The first normal concert was in 1981. It was a local, well, not a local, but it was a German punk pop band called Ideal. And the week after, it was a German band called Nena. Maybe you heard it. She had this huge hit in the 80s called 99 Red Balloons. Yeah, this was the first teenager pop concerts, and the first real metal show was Judas Priest on the Turbo tour. From then, it after that, I went to Manowar in '86 and stuff like this, and then it started to get more real for the music.
Have you ever been to a show in the United States?
Ah, yes, many times. I visited the US like 9 or 10 times in my life. Mainly, I went to shows. I was even at the on the final Kiss show in Madison Square Garden, 2023 December. I went to a lot of shows in Los Angeles, and but mainly these other shows were more underground festivals and bands. I just when I did a vacation there and there was a metal show, I went there.
So, where did the desire to break into that business sort of thing and start booking shows and running festivals and all that stuff? Where did that motivation come from?
Well, actually, I never wanted to do any business with any musical stuff, and I still don't do actually because Keep It True is, of course, it's run professionally, but in the end, it's my hobby. I don't do it professionally. I have a 9 to 5 job, and all the festival stuff is done in my free time. In when we started the festival in late 2002, back then the whole metal classic metal scene was like down. Like in the 90s and in the early 2000s, there was actually no classic traditional heavy metal band touring in Europe. Even Maiden had to play small venues for like 1,500 people here, and Priest the same. I was such a big fan of US metal, US power metal, and cult bands that never played in Europe. So I said no one else will do it, so I have to try my luck and just jump into the cold water and try it out. And I had a local band here called Majesty. They were like I would not say Manowar clone, but highly influenced by old Manowar. The main guy, Tarek, he was living like half an hour away from me, and he had a full PA system. He had all the instruments and all the technical knowledge to run a show, which I never had, and I learned a lot in it, but I still feel like a rookie in stage tech stuff. Everything, but not the stage tech. Yeah, I just thought of my favorite bands that I want to have over. So I first got in touch with Omen. It was a bit easier for me because since the early 90s, I was writing for magazines and fanzines, and I had contacts. Back then, it was way harder because there was no internet. You couldn't go on Google and look for the names and telephone numbers, or on Facebook or anything like this. You had to do real research. And with Omen, I had the contact because in '95 I visited the band in Texas. I did a In '95 I drove the whole Route 66 through America and stopped on all the towns where I knew musicians and slept at their apartments. I met Vicious Rumors there and Solitude Eternus, Hellstar, Omen, and so many more all through that road trip. And so I had the contact with Omen, and I told Kenny, the guitarist, I heard you want to release a new album very soon. Why don't you want to play in Europe for the first time? And he said, well, I that was my dream for so many years. We never got out of America, and we need to find a solution to finance it because we had no clue how many people will come. It could be a huge flop. So I made a deal with the bands, that we shared the flight costs and everything, because they can sell the merch and stuff. So it was very, very low budget. And then I also, the next band I always wanted to see in Europe was Broker's Helm, but I had no contact at all with them. I only knew they are from San Francisco. Of course, there was already internet, but there was no Google or anything, or Facebook, anything like this. So I searched the online telephone book of San Francisco for the name Jim Schumacher, which is the bassist. And they had, I think it was 25 or 30 Schumachers there. I called every number to get in touch with the real one. And I can tell you, back then, calling to America was highly expensive. Like nowadays, that it's nothing in the end. But back then, every call to America was very expensive. So I just called, "Hey, are you Jim Schumacher from Brockersham?" No. I think after 7 or 8 tryouts, I reached him and we talked on the phone. He could give me his email address and we could start talking without calling all the time. And yeah, I convinced them to come over. And I back then I picked up all the bands myself at the airport. On the way to the festival, there's a medieval town called Würzburg, and they have a huge castle on top of a hill. And of course, a band like Brokasam that sing about medieval topics, I just brought them from the way to the airport to the festival. I brought them to that castle, and there was a medieval museum there with original helmets, swords, and shields and everything. And I went with the guys through the museum, and they were like little kids in a toy store. This was unbelievable, and I still remember these things very, very vividly. And this is stuff you will never forget, because you are together with your idols. Even if it's only underground, they made your favorite music. And from that on, we were friends till now. They play here in April again, after the very first Keep It True in 2003, at the 25th anniversary of Keep It True. We stayed friends over all these years, and it's still the three original guys from back then. This is part of the whole festival philosophy, because I always want to treat the bands as nice as I can, because I want to remain friends with them after it. It's not like a business relationship or anything. It's about more like a family kind of thing. And I can say that with like 90 or 85 to 90%. I'm still in touch with the bands that played in all these years. I think that's a good sign that I do something right with it, because otherwise bands would say, I never want to talk to that idiot and his shit festival. So that's a good thing. And of course, nowadays it gets a little bit more complicated because of course, we have to book bigger brands too, with managements and all that stuff. So also there it gets more complicated. But for example, when we did Crimson Glory for the first time, their singer back then was Todd Latour, who is now the singer for Queensryche. And last week I went to Queensryche and met Todd again, and we still talk about the old times and remember it. And that's just a nice thing to have, because many people make life so complicated, but it actually can be so easy if you're just nice to each other.
Well said, man. Couldn't agree more. Oliver, I want to ask you how you came into contact with a mutual friend of ours, Joe, Deathmaster from Doomsword. I know you've known him for a long time. How did you guys first meet and get in contact?
Oh, this is a very long time ago. Of course, when the first Doomsword album came out, I read the reviews, and they talked about it's like Warlord and Manila Road, and all these. They were described with all these cult bands from the 80s, and I thought to myself, this is an Italian band. How can they sound like all these US cult bands? I bought the album. On the first listen, it was very complex, and I couldn't get into it on the first listen. But of course, I was curious, so I listened over and over again. and you need to listen to these songs many times to get the feeling what it's all about. All this epicness, these songs. It's not easy listening stuff. Then I wrote for a bigger German magazine called Heavy oder was, and they were recording the second album in Milano, and the magazine sent me there to do a studio report. I met them there. They were drinking like crazy there. I don't drink at all, so I felt a little bit lost there, to be honest, because all the other journalists who were there were drinking. They were sitting there and could not move anymore, and the album was great. And Joe and me, from that time on, we stayed in touch, and he invited me directly after that listening session. He invited me to his home, and he showed me his record collection and everything, and we had the same taste with everything. It just like it clicked with as personalities. Of course, then when I thought of doing a festival, they were one of the first options for me, because I love the people, I love the music, so I needed to get them, and I think it was their very first show or something they did. Years later, on the 10th Keep It True, I told Joe, the first show was great, but now I want to have a show with also the original singer, Nightcomer. And we did it, and he played a special part of the show with the original guy, and it was amazing, totally amazing. When Mark Shelton from Manila Road died, the year after, I did a tribute show with all his friends and befriended musicians, and of course, I invited Joe to be part of it, and he sang 2 or 3 songs there. I will never remember at the end of this show, because all these musicians that were part of the Manila Road tribute back then, they were close friends of Mark Shelton, and they loved the music so much. And after, it was a 3-hour show, and after they went on stage, they were standing in the backstage looking at each other, and everybody was starting to cry. I never saw something like this ever before on a show. They hugged each other and had tears in their eyes, and it was maybe the biggest emotional moment we ever had at Keep It True. Nobody saw it besides us backstage. So, but I think the feeling of the audience was the same. So you cannot force this stuff. You just need to try the best, and then you see what happens. And I gave them complete freedom of what they want to do and everything. And yeah, it was perfect.
So obviously, Oliver, when you're booking a festival, shit happens and sometimes you have a cancellation. Now, do you have a potential backup list that you're going to just in case someone cancels, or is it full blown scramble mode to try to find another band to fill that slot? How do you approach it?
There's actually no real backup list. I always want to have a replacement that's fitting to the band that canceled, because there's nothing worse when I go to a festival and my favorite band cancels, and they bring out there a complete different style that makes no sense to me. So I always want to try to get a replacement band that fits perfectly, even though it's not the band that was supposed to play, but that people can live with, to make it not too hard for the people. Most of the time it works out, but sometimes, of course, we once had a cancellation from Candlemass one day before the show. Then you have no choice.
So you said earlier that you have a 9 to 5. So once Keep It True is over, do you give yourself a rest period, or are you immediately booking for the following festival right after? Like, how far ahead are you?
I'm right now. I'm already booking for April 2026. I already have 2 bands confirmed for that we will announce this April. And this year we have the final Keep It True Rising, which was happening in Würzburg, in about half an hour from the original venue. We created this Keep It True Rising festival during COVID, because in our old venue during COVID we had no chance to do any show, because it was in a different state in Germany, and the rules in the other state were a bit different for doing shows. So we had a very little time frame where we could do a festival in the other venue. And this was maybe the most crazy idea I ever had in my life because it caused me so much stress. I booked like 20 bands within 3 or 4 weeks or something, and we built this up from nothing. On the Friday, when on noon, when the first band started, the Bavarian prime minister made a press conference saying, from Monday on, all shows are cancelled again. Imagine if he would have said, from right now, all shows are cancelled again. We wouldn't sit here and discuss about Keep It True. But people were enjoying it a lot. There were a lot of security measures. You had to have a negative COVID test to get in. Luckily, no masks were allowed because you cannot do a show with the masks. It's if it's maybe it's you can watch one band with a mask, but if you do a whole day, it's impossible. So we were very lucky that we could go through with the festival with no problems, and it was even though through the high restrictions, there were almost 2,000 people there, and people were so happy that they, after such a long time, no shows, they just could go to a festival again. And so we decided we do it every autumn again. But now that venue is closing early 2026. So in this October, there will be the very last edition of the festival, and then we go on with once in a year Keep It True in April in the original venue.
So, Oliver, if there were someone out there who wanted to get into this sort of thing, if they wanted to start their own festival and start booking bands, what advice would you give to them to get it off the ground?
Have strong nerves, be patient, and do a lot of research about bands and your fans that you want to attract. Because especially Keep It True is a very unique festival that's not comparable to all that mainstream festivals that are around. Because this is like a music orientated festival, which should be the normal thing nowadays, but it isn't, because I would say 90% of all the metal festivals, the people are about having a party, drinking, and get wasted. It's sad, but it is like it is. But at Keep It True, it's way different. When our opener starts at 12 at noon, the venue is packed usually. And you don't see this on other big festivals or anything like this. There are maybe 50 people in front of the stage because they don't care. It's just vacation for them. This is a meeting of music lovers from all over the world. And that's what makes the magic about the festival, because the most part of the people coming to Keep It True is not from Germany. It's really, of course, main part is all of Europe, but we have so many people from overseas, North America, South America, Japan, and we even had people from Africa coming for the festival and from everywhere. And even if they don't know a handful of bands, they come and learn new bands. And for them, also a big part of them is they meet once a year there. There were lifelong friendships built on Keep It True since 2003. And this is maybe the biggest achievement besides the music that we could do, is having all that people that normally never left the house together to see their favorite band, and then they met people that also never left the house, and they got good friends together, and so maybe their whole life changed because of this. I'm actually still very proud of how everything turns out, and the COVID years was a very big letdown for everyone and also us. But when we did the first one in the original location, it was like a big family meeting after all these years again, and people were very emotional about it. And this is what is it all about, actually.
Right on, man. That's definitely what it's all about. And Oliver, you're always asking on social media to fans, who do you want to see at the festival? Who are some of the bands you'd like us to book? But you personally, are there any bands that you haven't booked that are some white whales that you'd like to harpoon for the festival?
To be honest, most of the bands that I always wanted to have, I already did the resurrection of Sirith Ungol back then. That was for years. People said it's impossible. They will never play a live show again. And I worked for almost 20 years trying to convince the guys to do the show, and then with the help of Jarvis from Night Demon, which was a local guy for them, he could assist them locally. And I came over to Ventura to convince them. And then we finally could make it because they felt safe with him. And they knew me since 20 years. And so we could finally do it. And actually, I could not mention one band anymore because all the bands that I would mention would be like fantasy stuff that cannot happen because of several reasons. For example, original Manowar lineup, or I don't know, Kiss playing The Elder, or something like this. This is completely insane. And some bands that I would love to do are just too big. Like having an old Sabotage show with John Oliver singing, I don't know, Merciful Fate, first two album set or something like this. But this is way out of our range. And these bands, they get hilarious fees and everything. And actually, that's not what Kid is made for. I rather stay to my underground roots and don't get my head too high up. They can play all the big festivals. Maybe they don't have the dedicated fans like at Kid, but they get more money.
Well, Oliver, just to wrap up here, I know it's a bit later over there in Germany than it is here on the east coast of the USA, but a question I like to ask everyone is, have you ever had an experience you would consider supernatural, paranormal, or an event you can't explain?
This is a very good question. Is it boring to say no? I actually could not think of anything that would happen to me like supernatural. Oh well, maybe meeting John Cyrus from Agent Steel. It's supernatural to me. I had to kick his ass very badly, to be honest. Yeah, he behaved like a little kid. That's the only supernatural experience I had with alien-like creatures. I booked Agent Steel with him. He canceled all the shows before. He had the tour manager was a guy from Holland, and they came driving down from Holland, which is a 4 or 5 hour drive to the festival. And I told them, please give me updates where you are, because I knew they are shady, and so I can check on them. And of course, they delayed everything. Oh, there's a traffic jam, blah blah blah. And I checked Google Maps, no traffic jam at all. Then they were a third to last band, and then it was already their time. They have not arrived yet, but I didn't want to have the band after them playing now before them, because then he would have reached his goal just to play later on or not at all. So I actually made a longer break and played the Conan soundtrack to entertain people a little bit in between. And then he came. Our security rushed him to the dressing room, and then he locked up himself there and said, I need some minutes to get on stage. I need at least half an hour. I told him, you don't need half an hour. You get your ass out, and on the stage you are already 1 hour late or even more. And then they played a short 30-minute set because the time was not enough anymore, and it was not really good. The band was okay, but he could not perform. It was just, I had to prove that it's possible to have this band playing actually, even though I may have known in advance that it will only cause problems and that the performance would be not so good. People wanted to see it at least once. Now he's booking shows again with a different band and everything, but there's always a first time, and people remember this. I'm atheist.
Okay.
So my belief in supernatural is limited to magic tricks in fantasy movies.
Hey man, that's something. I'd say that counts. So, Oliver, just to put a bow on this thing here, is there anything you like to throw out there? Anything on the horizon you like to promote? Any ticket sales still going on?
Well, the April edition is sold out. We may offer a few more tickets soon because we have a little bit more space because of the metal market, but that's not sure yet. But we still have tickets for the October Kibitu Rising, the final one. There's Pretty Mates and Atlantic Codex and Angel Witch and many more. We are close to confirm the second headliner there. So there will be a bigger news coming up for this, but everything else is running very smooth. Maybe I can greet Arnold if he hears me to do the third Conan movie finally before he steps into his grave.
Hey man, never say never. I'll try to send this to Arnold for you, maybe. Anyway, Oliver, I really appreciate you, man. Had a great time chatting with you. Appreciate your time. And once I get this posted, I'll send you a link and all that good stuff.
Thank you very much. I will share it through my channels. Thank you. Bye bye.
All right, folks, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed that chat with Oliver. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you back next time.